The restaurant manager, with her crisp uniform and blonde hair, approached, her sharp gaze sweeping over the woman across from her. A glance passed from her frayed baseball cap down to her faded t-shirt, worn jeans, and unkempt sneakers. A barely visible smirk. "Listen," the manager's voice rang out, her contempt clear enough to make several nearby tables turn to look. "How can someone like you have the money to eat here? You can tell by looking at it. Is this card stolen?" The woman, the target of the vitriol, sat silently, her shoulders slumped under her worn dress. Her face was hidden by the brim of her hat, her expression unreadable, but the tension in the air was undeniable. "Pay up, or I'll call the police!" The manager continued her attack, her voice growing more and more agitated, her hand already on the phone at her side. She was sure she had the upper hand, dealing with a would-be cheat, someone who didn't belong here. But she made a fatal mistake. A judgment based on skin color and appearance is about to cost her an unimaginable price. Because the woman standing before her, who has just been humiliated, is not who she thinks she is. She is keeping a secret that could destroy her manager's career and life in the blink of an eye. What will happen next when the truth is revealed? Let's listen to the story of the price of judgment. Eleanor Vance is no stranger to hot kitchens or the clatter of knives on oak cutting boards. She has spent more than 30 years of her life transforming a small roadside diner into the Golden Spoon, a restaurant empire that spans America, a name synonymous with quality food, cozy atmospheres, and above all, impeccable customer service. That was her promise, the foundation she poured sweat, tears, and sleepless nights into. The core value Eleanor inculcated into every brick, every employee training process was absolute respect. Every customer, no matter who they were, how they dressed, where they came from, had to be greeted with a sincere smile and the most dedicated service. It was more than a business strategy, it was a personal belief, forged from her own experiences as a black woman rising up in a world that did not always welcome her with open arms. Lately, however, whispers had reached her ears. Not loud complaints, but subtler comments in anonymous surveys, online reviews that hinted at inconsistent treatment at some branches. Something was wrong. A vague but nagging worry crept into Eleanor's mind. Were the ugly stereotypes she had fought her whole life to eradicate now quietly taking root in her own garden? Had success made some in her staff complacent, starting to judge customers through the prism of wealth, status, or worse, race? She couldn't sit in her plush office and read reports. She needed to see for herself. She needed to see the truth with her own eyes, feel it with her own heart. And so, on a hot Tuesday afternoon, Eleanor Vance, the powerful CEO who appeared in business magazines with her impeccably tailored suits and confident smiles, was gone. Instead, she was a tired-looking middle-aged woman dressed casually to the point of sloppiness. She wore a gray t-shirt frayed at the shoulders, jeans faded at the knees, old sneakers, and a baseball cap pulled low over her face. Over her shoulder was a simple canvas backpack that looked like it contained a few odds and ends. No one would recognize her, which was exactly what she wanted. She wanted to walk into one of her restaurants as a regular customer, perhaps even an underrated customer, to see if the promise of respect was actually kept. She chose the Golden Spoon in the suburb of Oak Creek, a place known for its middle-class residents, spacious homes, and high expectations for service. It was the height of the lunch rush. Eleanor pushed open the door and stepped inside, immersed in the bustling atmosphere. The clatter of knives and forks, the sounds of laughter, and the delicious aroma of food filled the elegantly decorated space with warm tones and soft lighting. She looked around. The staff in clean uniforms moved quickly between the tables. Most of them looked professional, though their faces were busy. A young man with brown hair and a bright smile approached her. "Welcome to the Golden Spoon," he said, his voice clear and friendly. "Are you alone?" "Yes, alone," Eleanor replied, her voice soft. "This way, please," He led her to a small table for two, tucked away in a quieter corner of the restaurant. "I'm Leo, and I'll be serving you today. Would you like an appetizer or a drink first?" Leo's attitude pleased Eleanor. Professional, polite, without a hint of judgment in his eyes as he looked at her plain appearance. This was the standard she expected. "I'd like a glass of unsweetened iced tea and a menu, please." Leo quickly brought over iced tea and menus. Eleanor ordered tomato soup and grilled chicken salad, familiar dishes whose recipes and quality standards she knew well. As she waited, she continued to look around, paying particular attention to a tall, blonde woman walking around nervously, holding a tablet. It was definitely Karen Miller, the branch manager whose file she had reviewed. Karen looked to be in her mid-40s, blonde, and wore a darker blue manager's uniform than the waitresses. She seemed energetic and efficient, but Eleanor detected a certain impatience in the way she directed her staff. When a young waitress accidentally dropped a tray of empty glasses, causing a loud clatter, Karen turned around, her eyes as sharp as a knife, and let out a reprimand loud enough for several nearby tables to hear. "Watch out! You're startling the customers." Her voice wasn't exactly shouting, but it was unnecessarily harsh. Later, Eleanor witnessed Karen welcoming a well-dressed couple, clearly regulars. Karen's smile brightened, her voice sweet, her manner warm. She personally led them to a nice table near the window, chatting a few friendly words. But just a few minutes later, when a black family with three rather active young children walked in, Karen's smile seemed to freeze. She pointed to a table in a slightly noisier area and handed it to another staff member, her eyes flashing with annoyance when a child spilled water on the floor. Eleanor sighed. These subtle signs made her uneasy. Discrimination wasn't always overtly insulting. Sometimes it was disguised as fake smiles, quick glances, differences in tone and enthusiasm. Leo brought the food, interrupting Eleanor's thoughts. "Here's your tomato soup and grilled chicken salad. Enjoy your meal." He kept that friendly smile. Eleanor began to eat. The tomato soup was hot and rich. The salad was fresh. The chicken was grilled to perfection. The quality of the food was still guaranteed. She ate slowly, continuing to observe Karen from a distance. The manager seemed to be on edge, pacing back and forth, checking this table, reminding that employee. Maybe managing a restaurant during peak hours was really stressful, Eleanor thought to herself, trying to find an objective reason for Karen's attitude. But the image of the different treatment she gave to different groups of customers still lingered in her mind. Lunch was drawing to a close. Eleanor finished her soup and salad. The deliciousness of the food did not completely dispel the growing unease she felt about the manager. She decided it was time to end this secret visit. She signaled to Leo. The young man quickly appeared. "Are you done? Would you like some dessert or coffee?" "No, thank you." "Can I have the bill?" Eleanor smiled slightly. "Yes, please wait a moment." Leo turned away and returned shortly afterwards with a small bill placed in a leather book. Eleanor looked at the bill. It wasn't a large amount, just over $50. She pulled out a regular personal credit card from her small wallet, the kind that millions of Americans use every day, with no special markings. She handed the card to Leo. "Thank you, great service." "Thank you." Leo took the card and the mobile POS machine. He swiped the card. A soft beep sounded, and the screen displayed red text. "Transaction declined." Leo frowned, a little surprised. He tried swiping again, more carefully. The result was the same. "Oh, sorry," Leo said, sounding apologetic. "It looks like there's a problem with your card. The system sometimes goes down. Would you like to try again or use a different card or pay in cash?" His tone was professional and respectful, without any hint of doubt or annoyance. Eleanor knew for a fact that her card was fine. She had used it to buy gas that morning and checked her account online before heading to the restaurant. It must have been a POS or system glitch. "This is all I have with me, and unfortunately I don't have enough cash," she said calmly. "Could you try another POS at the cash register, or check to see if the restaurant's payment system is having any issues?" Leo looked a little confused. It was rush hour, and running to the cash register could take some time, and he didn't want to keep other customers waiting. "Let me call my manager, Karen, and see if she can help," he offered, thinking it would be the quickest solution. He gestured to Karen, who was standing a short distance away, supervising the drinks station. Karen Miller approached the table, walking quickly, her face showing her impatience at having another problem to deal with in the crowded restaurant. Her eyes swept over Eleanor, from the cap that hid most of her face, down to the old t-shirt, the faded jeans, and stopped for a second at the backpack at the foot of the chair. An almost imperceptible smirk played across her lips. Judgment was already forming, a flash of lightning in her mind. "What's going on here, Leo?" Karen asked, her voice lacking the patience she usually had when talking to posh customers. Leo briefly explained that the customer's card had been declined multiple times and that the customer did not have enough cash. He handed the card to Karen. Karen snatched the card away, not looking at Eleanor. She swiped it against Leo's handheld POS. "Declined." The red text appeared again. Karen clicked her tongue loudly, her frustration evident on her face. And then the storm broke. The pent-up stress of rush hour, combined with the implicit prejudices against blacks and casual dress, broke through Karen's thin veneer of professionalism. She turned sharply on Eleanor, her voice dripping with undisguised contempt. "Listen," she began, her voice high and malicious. "You come in here to eat without paying? I can tell by the way you're dressed." The word "you" was emphasized, full of racial connotations, a prejudiced way of speaking aimed at an entire community. Eleanor froze. Her ears rang. Though she had braced herself for the possibility of being treated unfairly, she still couldn't believe these words were coming from the mouth of a manager of her own company. It felt like an invisible knife had just stabbed her heart. Karen continued, anger and contempt rising like a flood. "This is the Golden Spoon, a decent place, not a way station for vagrants and scammers. This card, is it stolen? Or do you think you can just come in here and order and pretend your card is faulty and you'll get a free meal?" Each word was like needles stabbing into Eleanor's flesh. She could feel the blood rushing to her face, not from shame, but from anger and hurt. The pain in her chest brought back distant memories of times she had been judged, despised because of the color of her skin, invisible barriers she had overcome with more effort than anyone else. And now, right in the place she had thought was the safe haven she had created, history was repeating itself in a cruel way. "Why don't you just pay? Or are you really broke?" Karen continued her attack, her tone growing more vicious. "People like you are always causing trouble. Maybe you should go back to where you came from." The racist slur was now blatant and explicit. Eleanor took a deep breath, trying to control the trembling that was spreading through her body. She raised her head, her eyes fixed on Karen, not looking away. There was no longer fear or shame in those eyes, but boundless disappointment and a suppressed anger. She saw the twisted glee on Karen's face, the glee of someone who had taken power and used it to humiliate someone they considered weaker. The air around them seemed to thicken. Several diners at nearby tables stopped eating, turning to look back with looks of curiosity, shock, or annoyance. A middle-aged man shook his head in dismay. Another woman quickly turned away, pretending not to have heard anything. Leo stood frozen in place, his face pale with fear and shame. He looked at Eleanor with pity, then back at his manager with helplessness. He was just a young employee. He didn't dare confront the manager in his rage. A tense silence fell over the small area, broken only by Karen's panting and the pounding in Eleanor's chest. The storm had truly arrived. Amidst the heavy silence, Eleanor took a deep breath, gathering what little calm she had left. Her voice rang out, not loud but clear and weighty, cutting through the tense atmosphere. "I would like to speak to your higher-up manager," she said, her eyes still fixed on Karen, unwavering. "Or would you please give me the direct contact information for the owner of the Golden Spoon restaurant chain?" Karen's response was a sneer, full of mockery and self-satisfaction. She crossed her arms over her chest, looking at Eleanor as if she were an alien. "The owner?" She laughed, a dry, unpleasant laugh. "Who do you think you are asking to see the owner? Do you know who our boss is? She's a big businesswoman, busy with a million things. She doesn't have time for troublemakers like you." Karen raised her eyebrows, her expression becoming more challenging. "Listen carefully. 1, you find a way to pay immediately. 2, I will call the police on you for harassment and attempted fraud." She reached out, intending to pick up the cell phone clipped to her belt. That's when Eleanor decided it was time to pull the plug. She couldn't let this insult continue, couldn't let the company's image and values be trampled on by her own employees any longer. "There's no need to call anyone, Miss Miller," Eleanor said, her voice still even but now with undeniable authority. She looked straight into Karen's wide, surprised eyes. "Because I own it." There was a deadly silence. Karen blinked, as if not comprehending what she had just heard. What did you say?" Eleanor didn't answer right away. She bent down slowly, picked up her simple canvas backpack, and placed it on the empty chair beside her. She unzipped it. Inside, not the cheap, messy stuff Karen might have imagined, but neatly organized, contained a small tablet, a notebook, and a slim, elegant leather briefcase. Eleanor's hand slid into her briefcase, pulling out 2 things: a thick, finely printed business card and her citizen identification card. She gently placed both on the table, right in front of Karen Miller, close enough for her to read each word. On the business card, the golden letters stand out against the cream-colored paper. Eleanor Vance, founder and CEO of the Golden Spoon Restaurants, Inc. Beside her was an ID card with a portrait of her, an Eleanor Vance with professionally styled hair, intelligent eyes, and a confident smile, completely different from the woman in the baseball cap standing before Karen, but there was no mistaking the features. "Eleanor Vance," she repeated, her voice now devoid of any emotion, but cold seriousness. "The one who sweated and burned to build the Golden Spoon, the one who wrote down the rules of customer service, of respect and equality, rules you just mercilessly trampled on because you didn't like the color of my skin and the clothes I wore." Eleanor's words were like hammer blows to Karen's mind. The manager stared at the business card, then at the ID, then looked up at Eleanor's face hidden under the brim of her cap. Her eyes widened in disbelief, then slowly turned to horror as the undeniable truth began to sink in. The smug, contemptuous look on Karen's face shattered like glass thrown against a rock. The color drained from her face, leaving her skin a pale, ashen white. Her lips moved, but she couldn't form words. "No, it can't be," she stammered, her voice cracking. Karen's body began to shake uncontrollably. She took a step back, then another, tripping over one foot and almost falling backwards if she hadn't grabbed a nearby chair. The cell phone slipped from her hand and fell to the floor with a dry clatter that echoed in the suffocating silence. All activity around seemed to stop. The nearby customers who had witnessed the whole thing were now speechless. Some gasped in shock. Some covered their mouths with their hands. Some looked at Karen with a mixture of pity and contempt. Leo, the young waiter, stood rooted to the spot, his eyes wide open as he looked at Eleanor with awe and disbelief. He could not believe that the plainly dressed woman he had just served was the powerful CEO of the entire corporation. The truth was out, and for Karen Miller, it was a stark, bitter, horrifying truth. The curtain of her pride and prejudice had been pulled back in a most brutal way. A heavy silence enveloped Karen Miller like a shroud. Faced with the harsh reality and Eleanor Vance's stern gaze, her last defenses collapsed. Karen's knees buckled, and she almost collapsed to the floor if it weren't for the chair holding her up. And then she burst into tears. Not tears of anger or self-pity, but choked sobs of utter fear and indescribable shame. Tears streamed down her pale face, mixing with her makeup that was starting to smudge. "Oh, God. Oh, God." Karen stuttered through sobs, her hands covering her face. I'm sorry. Mrs. Vance, I'm really, really sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was you." She raised her tear-stained face and looked at Eleanor with pleading, panicked eyes. Please forgive me. I had a bad day. So stressed. There were too many customers. I wasn't thinking. She tried to come up with weak excuses, but even she knew they didn't mean anything at the moment. "Please don't fire me," Karen pleaded, her voice trembling. "I need this job. I have a family to support. I've been here for almost 10 years. Please give me a chance. Please." The desperation was evident in her words, in the way she clung to the last shred of hope. Eleanor Vance stood there, listening silently to the manager's pleas and sobs. Her face was still stern, but the initial coldness had softened a little. The fiery anger of earlier had cooled, replaced by a more complicated feeling. Deep disappointment at the behavior of a senior employee, sadness at the lingering prejudices, and a reluctant sympathy for the weakness, fear, and ignorance that lay before her. She felt no joy at Karen's demise, only a heavy sadness. When Karen's sobs died down to a choked sob, Eleanor spoke. Her voice was calm, not harsh, but each word carried the weight of truth and power. "Karen," she began, "the stress of the job can never be an excuse for racism and disrespect towards customers. The words you said to me today were not just personal insults. They are completely contrary to the ethics and core values that the Golden Spoon was built on." She paused, letting her words sink into Karen and those listening around her. "You looked at me and made the worst judgments based on the color of my skin and the clothes I wore. You treated me like I had no value, no respect. That was unacceptable no matter who I was." Eleanor glanced at Leo, who was still standing silently with a tense expression. "Young Master Leo," she said, her voice a little warmer, "has welcomed and served me with the professionalism and respect that every customer, regardless of appearance or status, deserves. That is the standard of the Golden Spoon." The unexpected compliment made Leo look up, his eyes shining with gratitude and relief. Eleanor turned to look at Karen, who was still looking down, her shoulders shaking. She was thinking fast. Firing Karen immediately would be the easiest thing to do, the way to show her power, to send a strong message. But was it the best solution? Would it really change anything in Karen's mind? Or would it just remove a superficial problem? She saw regret in Karen's puffy eyes, a regret that might have been initially born of fear of losing her job, but now, perhaps, was also laced with genuine shame for her own actions. Eleanor believed in second chances, but that chance had to come with real responsibility and change. "I won't fire you outright, Karen," Eleanor said, causing Karen to look up with a glimmer of hope. "But make no mistake, your actions today will have serious consequences." She continued, her voice firm. "First, you will have to attend a mandatory intensive training course on diversity awareness, anti-racism, and unconscious bias. Not a one-off session, but a serious program arranged by the company or a reputable outside organization. You must complete it with flying colors. Second, you will be placed under close supervision for the next 6 months. Every activity, every decision, every interaction you have with customers and employees will be closely monitored. I want to see a real change in your attitude and behavior. And finally," Eleanor emphasized, "any expression, no matter how small, of discrimination, disrespect, or prejudice during this challenging time will result in immediate termination of employment, with no recourse." She looked Karen straight in the eye. "This is not a simple punishment, Ms. Miller. This is an opportunity for you to learn, to correct your mistakes, and to demonstrate that you truly understand the harm that prejudice-based words and actions can cause. My forgiveness is not a free gift. You must earn it through sincere change." Karen, still shaking but somewhat calmer, listened to Eleanor's every word. She nodded repeatedly, tears still streaming down her cheeks. Yes, Mrs. Vance. I understand. I accept all the terms. I will do my best. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this chance." Her voice was hoarse from crying, but it sounded sincere. Eleanor nodded slightly. She turned to Leo. "Mr. Leo, please cancel this bill for me. Today's lunch, consider it the company's treat." "Yes, Mrs. Vance," Leo replied, quickly carrying out the request. Eleanor looked around the restaurant. Curious, concerned eyes were still on her and Karen. The atmosphere was still tense, but the storm seemed to have passed, leaving behind debris to be cleaned up. She adjusted her cap and slung her backpack over her shoulder. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the Golden Spoon. The bright afternoon sun made her squint. She took a deep breath, the fresh air filling her lungs, but the aftertaste of the incident was still bitter. The secret visit had exposed a painful truth about the prejudice that still existed, even in the very house she had worked so hard to build. But it had also given her the opportunity to confront, to repair, to reinforce the core values she had always believed in. The fight against judgment and discrimination was still a long and arduous journey, but today, at least, a valuable lesson had been taught. And Eleanor Vance walked away, her back straight in the sun, stronger and more determined than ever, ready for the next challenge. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you like this content, please click like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories, because tomorrow we will have another meaningful story for you.